Let's imagine that that introduction was different. I would ask you to think of the worst thing that you can think of. I want you to kind of close your eyes, and I want you to look down at the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce to you today an old white man, a heterogeneous male, a general. To make it worse, a Marine general. Hoorah. A cop, and somebody who's doing work in intelligence. Imagine if that were the introduction you just had. How many here genuinely, you're in a room where God is presumably a little closer, generally might have had a slightly different perspective on the speaker had that been the introduction? Right. Both introductions are true, but you chose to think about them differently. Not you personally, but we as a human being chose to think about them differently. But they are both true. So with that in mind, let me have a chance to talk about a couple things and say, what if I had been introduced as, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce Doug Stone, a son of Abraham. We're probably all still on the same sheet. And then if I were to walk up and say, Shalom, where would you go? Right. What if I walked up and said, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce a son of Abraham, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah? Or what if I walked up and somebody said, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce a son of Abraham, Doug Stone, and I go, peace, brother. All of those are kind of true, right? Not as true, but kind of true. So let's be honest with ourselves when we think about this very important topic of bias. We'll just use the kind word. Because let's not point the other finger, when in fact, to do so is to point four of them back at ourselves. And let's not be quick to judge on things that frankly are quite important. Now, I have raised, my wife and I have raised two daughters. Neither one is particularly biased on anything that I'm aware of. And on occasion, I take them to downtown Sacramento. Not because I want my grandchildren to know this, but I want to make sure that they know this. And as we're walking down, without my badge, without being in uniform, large black guys with a lot of bling are walking towards us. And instead of getting off the sidewalk, which is what my daughters would naturally do, we walk up to them. And I say, hello, how you doing? And for a moment, they do pretty much the same thing you did. It's the son of Abraham, Shalom. They sort of, but within 10 seconds, we're having a conversation. Within 20 seconds, I know where the store that I want to go to is. And literally, within 30 seconds, nobody has been raped or beaten up. As hard as that is to believe, that is actually the case. Why do I do that? I do it for the same reason with my own family, that we need to do that kind of thing in our communities. Because, and let's get to the first slide, and I'm up here presumably to be at the same level as the slides, because there are at least a few principles that I need you and I to understand from my perspective. The first one is that it is our job in the interfaith business, it is our job in government service, commercial business, elsewhere, to work to enhance trust in our partnership. Not easy. You and I didn't trust each other on many of those introductions. You immediately said, I am not trusting this guy. Until I said, well, but they're all the same. Then we met, then I didn't trust the black guy when I walked up to him. I don't trust Al-Qaeda when I meet with him one-on-one. But why? Because I have a human survival instinct. And it's important for you in a world of spirituality to recognize the very human component of who you are. You have a survival instinct. So when you walk up, you want to walk away. But let's not move the survival instinct to a spiritual instinct. And if we cross over that, the first point is vital, that we learn to establish trusting partnerships. By trust, I want to quote my wife, a counseling psychologist. Today, I want you to know I love you, but I really don't like you. Now, that used to hurt me, okay? I think, what do you mean? You love me, but you don't like me? But I've never heard my wife say, you know what? I like you. I don't like you. I like you. And never follow it with, and I don't love you. Ever. And I don't remember doing that once with anybody, Al-Qaeda, Daesh members. I don't remember doing it to anybody. Because I've been taught in a mixed world, my mother Roman Catholic, my father American Indian, to essentially respect everything that is alive. So there's a lot of things I don't like. But to be brutally honest, there's very little I don't love. Second point, that we need to engage them all on issues that are common to all of us, in this case, public safety. And that we need to engage not just them, or they, or the government, or the religion, or the rabbi, or the, but all of us. And that if we utilize these partnerships, and I'm going to show you what's been done in LA at the very end of this, what we have overcome in LA, I'm going to show you by building partnerships to counter violent extremism. And I want to make sure that you understand there is no middle ground on this. Everybody gets trained. Not just you, not just your children, not just your leadership, not just your sub-leadership, everybody. There's no room for everybody to not be engaged in the topic. When I do that, do the next slide. So today we're going to hear some stories, and I'm going to try to move through them quickly because we did start a little late, but it's a lot of material, and for that I apologize. But I have been war fighting in Pakistan and Iraq and Afghanistan a lot of time, 40-some months, I think. I have been working with a lot of Muslim nations, 30 or so. I still work with them. I just came from a very Christian, very Catholic nation, Malta, just 3 or 4 days ago. And I'm on my way to Indonesia, to Jakarta, to deal with a very threatening issue. So then I'll be in Morocco, and the list goes on. You'll see some of the work that we're doing. But of course, I also work in the police department, and I also work in the council, the Fusion Center, which is an FBI intelligence center. This is the world, and this is the world that we live in. We don't have another world to live in. I left Antarctica off quite a bit, but for that I apologize. There are some valuable little penguins down there that are cool. But I mean, in principle, this is our world. And for many of you, I'm sure you're from elements and you've traveled to them. But I don't know, 70, 80 nations, maybe something like that. The more I go, the more I like my own bed, sleeping next to my own wife, and the more that I realize how small the world is and how many commonalities we have amongst the same issues. And another bias that I would have said in my earlier introduction is, I have sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and, in this case, the state of California. And what I am opposed to, and what I have killed for, and what I have sacrificed, nearly sacrificed my life multiple times, is to ensure that innocents are not taken advantage of, that the rule of law is not inappropriately applied to them, that their life might be removed because somebody else made that choice. That is why I fight. It's why at my should have already been retired age, I went to the police academy, the oldest guy, I think, in California to do that. Imagine 56 20-year-olds and me in formation. I was 20 years older than my teachers. So it's a small world, and we'll come back to that in another way in a second. I want to show you some friends of mine. I put these individuals together for a training course, and I wanted to introduce you to them. They're all deep and close friends, and I have lots of videotapes about them and lots of things. But I want you to hear from them a little bit about how they think of radicalization. And then we're going to end with the only other video. We don't have time for the other ones that I would like to show today. So we sort of just picked these two out. So let's go ahead and see if we can play this. All it takes is the courage of the community. Did you hear that? And Muban, is a friend of mine, is a former mujahideen, a former terrorist. And it now works extraordinarily well with us. And I could spend a lot of time on that, but I'm so worried about our time that I'm going to press on. So my initial thoughts, and if we don't talk about anything else, and there's a lot more to talk about and show, if I just leave it at this, I think I will have communicated what's really important to me. And that is that the threat, just like my introduction, the threat cannot be made to be the focus of a community's activity. Because the threat is such a small, almost insignificant number. And to generalize from what is happening in Iraq or Syria or elsewhere around the globe to a local community is actually analytically incorrect, both numerically. It's inappropriate as a citizen. It's inappropriate in terms of the rights and privileges that we've been granted as an American. It's inappropriate for police who have sworn to defend the Constitution and for military who are the Constitution of the government to allow it. And that's why I'm here. I think this issue is so important that I think it's no longer the green line over there, it's more or less the blue line back here. We have a responsibility to our country as individuals to ensure that all individuals are treated that way. We don't have to like them. And I guess you don't have to love them. But if you love America, you should at least tolerate them. The second point is that law enforcement is a big part of the problem and a big part of the solution. And it's why I've chosen to go into law enforcement. I could have done lots of other things. I'm actually a paramedic. I could be in doing medical. I still work in the emergency room. There's a lot of things I could do, but it's the only place I know where the threat to our communities and to innocence is as great as it is today. And I want to point out something else, that unless you have traveled, I guess, unless you even go in the communities, unless you just live with Muslims, it is not, Muslim faith, Islam itself is not monolithic. It's not everybody agrees. It's not like you knock one peg and all the dominoes go over, any more than Christians are. I think the largest religion in America is probably still Catholic. I could be wrong about that. Maybe my point's not the largeness of the number. But when the Pope showed up the other day, I know, were my mother alive, and she was a pretty hardcore Catholic, she would say, I don't think that one's right. I don't want you kids to really listen to that part. That doesn't make sense. I don't believe that. Okay? She would do this auf Deutsch. Because she didn't accept everything. And so it's patently insane to think that all Baptists are the same. I mean, how many sects of Baptist religion are there? And all of you who are, in the faith know that faiths don't agree. So why is it that because there's 6 or 7 million Muslims that you think they all agree? I mean, if it isn't clearly apparent, terrorists kill Muslims. That's who they're killing. I could give you the numbers. I could show you the numbers. And you go, oh my God, but what about the reporter who is American? Yes, what about the reporter who is American? The reporter who is American. Not the 250,000, the 1.8 million Muslims that are being killed by Muslims. So I want you to have some gravity to it, and I'll show you how I got there in a second. And I do want to point out, and I want to get to it, if we don't do anything else, we're going to, at the 15-minute mark, we're going to show you what we've done in LA, because I want you to have a feeling for what your community could be like if it was a choice you made to do it. But I think these principles will apply, because there are good models. There are terrible models in the United States. I get that. okay? There are terrible everything in the United States. There's nothing that I can talk to you about that would be good. There are terrible Catholic priests. There are terrible people of any color. There are all terrible people, terrible things. They happen. They sin, to use the parlance. But that doesn't mean it's all that way, right? And if I can come back to, it's okay to love them, it's just not okay to like them. And if you don't like it, then you have to change it, which is presumably what my wife does when she tells me that. She's looking for some change, right? I love you, but I don't like that. Stop spending money on that, which is normally farming for me or something. I don't want to give any bad habits here. Okay, next. Skip through this. This is just I have a great presentation on a returning foreign fighter. That was him, and he's now working with us, but we'll skip over that. Let's just go to Iraq. We're going to go fairly quickly, so kind of watch the hand. I was deputy commander in Iraq. I was given all interrogation, all detention, all hospitals, a bunch of other things. And I get there right after Abu Ghraib. Now, some of you remember this. Now, frequently, just like my police academy, you know, well, like, what was Iraq? What was Vietnam? If I talk, you want to know war fighting? Tell them you're a Vietnam vet. They'll go, cool. Like, I have a friend that just went over there to do shopping. No, not the same. Okay? It's my father. My father had a terrible problem for, I don't know, I mean, he died early. I don't know that he didn't always have some animosity towards Japanese. He fought in World War II. My father-in-law fought against the Germans. And despite the fact that, you know, he fought against the Germans, he liked my mother, who was German, because they both hated the Germans. So, I mean, people, it takes a long time, particularly if you're a war fighter, to get over it. So I have very close friends who don't like Muslims. And they don't like Muslims because for a year and a half, every single day of their life, a Muslim was trying to shoot them. And they're having a hard time replacing that Muslim with any other Muslim. They'll get through it, but you have to understand it. If I shot at you every day, you would say, old white males that were former generals are bad people. Right? You would, if I shot at you every time I saw you. But you can get over that. There's only a few of them that are really bad, and I'll tell you who they are. So, next. We kept them in big camps. Next. By and large, they were quite young. Now, I'm going to begin to do something here that got me in trouble with Congress and Codels and a bunch of other people. I'm going to dispel the rumor. Iraq was not full of terrorists. All Muslims who were there were not terrorists. They were not all fighting to kill us. We went there, and if they came in my backyard, I'd be shooting too. I shoot raccoons, and I know you probably like them, but they eat my chickens. Next. Oh, hold it, go back, that's it, hold it. I want to point out, the vast majority had family, brothers and sisters. 27,000, by the way. I'm the largest holder of human beings in warfare since right about mid-stride in the Korean War. Next. Very complex. The majority of them had children. The majority of them had been married. About 40% at the time were interfaith, non-sectarian. So they Shia, Sunni marriages. Next. Here's who we were fighting. And you will never hear me put down anybody in uniform, ever. If I don't like them, I'll say it. So I don't want to put this down. I don't want you to say, whoa. They were largely unemployed craftsmen who had been kicked out of school. That's what that says. There was no formal training. They didn't know what they were doing, and they were motivated for a lot different reasons than you think. Next. They were as mad about sectarianism between Shia and Sunni as you can imagine. So if we stood by a Sunni group, they would shoot. You see my point? They had massive economic issues caused in large part by the fact we overthrew Saddam Hussein. Massive economic issues. They were unable to support their families. By the way, the sectarian issues were translated like, my neighbor Abdul is a terrorist. He's got like 3 AK-47s in his house. Whoa, we go in there at 2 o'clock, we find the AKs, we take him out, we put him in detention. He probably did have the AKs, but he wasn't a terrorist. But guess what I got because I did that? I got his wives, I got all his goats, and I got to move into his house. Because if you go to detention, you're not coming out of detention in Iraq for a year and a half. They knew that. So that's the role sectarianism played. Religious extremism, in some cases. Let's talk about that in a second. Revenge, huge, and a lot of attitude towards us. Again, go to somebody's country and not expect them to, want to shoot back. Next. This is an interesting chart. Now, I'm going to show you how I know all this in a second, but I spent a disproportionate of my time studying these things. It's the problem with having a PhD, working for a PhD, Petraeus. He allowed me to do this kind of analysis right in the middle of combat. Like, whoa, combat's getting blown up. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm studying the numbers, okay? That's what true academicians do. So all of you who haven't been there, I don't want to hear it. Let me grade your thesis as your doctoral advisor. Okay, traditional on the far left, secular on the far right, extremism. So you see, there weren't very many extremists. They didn't exist. In fact, we're going to go on, and I could show you thousands of charts. Look at this religiosity. Up at the very top, basically had no religion, 1%. Went every week, about 28%. Went sometimes, about 30%. Only on special days, 4%. Most of these are sheep herders by who couldn't get back in. And 36% never went to services. 36%. So that'll be like 4 out of 10 that were attacking us are terrorists, but they didn't even go to their religion. Remember the white man, old white guy general thing? That's kind of that, only different. Next. How many of them, this is complex, and this is actually a very sophisticated psychological exam. Really, no kidding. Okay, martyrdom, depression, trauma, and anxiety. Look how big those issues were for these people. Huge, right? So now we're going to not make points, and we're going to do this in about a minute because we don't have time, and I want to take you to a video. Next. Just go ahead. So money was the motivator. Next. We'll skip this. Next. Skip this. I'd love to make that point. Skip that. 2 points, and then we're going to go to the video at the very end. This is the way detention was before I took it up. We captured them. We wrote a book on them. How many of the books in the comments do you think were exactly the same out of 1,000? You think 1? Yeah, about 500, right? They simply said, yeah, okay, got that. Yeah, oh, they got that. And it read, at 2 o'clock in the morning was found with a possession of inappropriate things, sort of they were charged with terrorism. And that's it. So I said, come on. And then when they put in detention, see the bottom right? That's how big detention was, right? Big comps. Well, now when people say, geez, Daesh, they got together in Camp Bucca. That was Camp Bucca. And they had time to talk. Really? Look at them. What do they have to do but talk? So we set up detention without understanding we were setting up camps for radicalization. Every one of these issues, by the way, every one of these issues, some of you are nodding, and like that, you would not be nodding 10 years ago or 8 years ago. You'd be going, charge that guy with court-martial that guy. But this is true. It was true then, it's true now. It's still true. By the way, I could do the same kinds of number of facts in your community. And you're going, it's just not true, depending upon where you are with the white male. You with me? Okay, next. So this is what we did. Last chart, and I can't show you a whole bunch of other fun things. We captured them, and then we interrogated them. I am a professional interrogator. Do not work with me if you don't want to have things found out. We found a 69-year-old woman who was molesting her grandchild, mentally ill grandchild. Nobody knew that, but after I got into talking to her, she admitted to it, and et cetera. So that's what I do, right? It's a gift of God to me. And don't ever try to be my child either, because... And then we gave them a court hearing, and then you see all these people in a row, 23 separate assessments. I mean, detainees would come in, one day they'd be like farming, the next day like, what's your education, and give a psychological test and point to this and what they were like, but what did we find out? We found out the truth, what was really going on. We found out who they weren't as much as we found out who they were. And then opposed to General Odierno, who just left the Army, he and I used to argue every morning. In fact, I have a bruise from Petraeus in my leg for telling me to stop arguing with him. He kicked me at the table because I met with Petraeus and him every morning, right? I mean, imagine that for a lifestyle. And, but he wanted to put everybody in prison, and I wanted to let everybody out that shouldn't be in there. Because I kept saying every time they're in, they're getting worse. He said, I don't give a damn. As long as they're in there, they're not out here. I go, yeah, well, but it's not your country. So blah, blah, blah. You get the point. So then I had him come down and charge him. So you know what they do, right? You got these guys, and it's a lieutenant colonel and a major. They go, sir, could I see the book? Sure. No, I want to see the book on this guy. You got it. But it looks just like the last guy. Well, why does it look just like the last guy? Because the guy who put him in there, along with the other half of the people that are in here, all have the same book. Why do they have the same book? Because they weren't charged with anything any different. Well, how do we know? Why are they in detention? My point exactly, Colonel. So then we went through educating. We did civics, and we had 200 imams working for us, VOTEC, so they could have a job, and their families. We started camp with 3,000 visitations. By the time I left, we had to build a city. 300,000 families were visiting their detainees. Now, what do you think's good about that? Think community. Think Tennessee. Think your nation. Micronation. If you have 300,000 families, you have 300,000 and all their kids opportunity to at least talk to them. At least give them a civics course. At least help them understand what's not happening and what is happening. Do you see? It's this engagement, going back to my first point. Then, of course, we did a transition and moved them out and then stayed monitoring. Okay, now, go all the way to the end, to the last video. And we're going to skip over a whole bunch in there about things we're doing internationally, about the principles that was mentioned in the Rome Memorandum, principles that we've now put together in what's called the Malta Memorandum, and things that we're doing inside the community. So I want to skip all that, which is really interesting. It's kind of like slides like that, but it'll just take too much time. But what I wanted you to do now is take a look at a program that we have been working on for some time. And all of these people are my friends, every one of them committed to it. And I can't say, because it's inappropriate. Just like some of the people you saw in the first tape we put together for you, some of the tapes that these are not people who would have ever taken this approach. In fact, I would have to say they were the ones who would have said, old general, that one, they would have really made it clear that they're not interested in helping here. But take a look at what they've done now. Let me just give a couple comments in summary. The slides that I didn't show you would have compelled you to understand how working with prisoners, in part, your enemy, in part, biases, for sure, definitions about truth, as in what's a terrorist and what's not, to be certain. Because what I would have shown you are Americans who we were able to bring home because Al-Qaeda themselves trusted me and gave us where they were buried. The greatest stores of ammunition found during the entire Iraq War were found after this program and because of detainees. The greatest amount of information about things that are highly classified provided to us by families. They didn't have to share any of that, but they chose to do it out of respect and trust. And the result, despite the fact like a big whiteboard, it's been erased. The result of the surge is that we left that country calm. IEDs were down, killing was down, it was nothing compared to what it is today or was before. So for a moment in time, a drop of water in an ocean, it went well. And I think where my boss Dave Petraeus here, he would say a huge part of it was because of what we chose to do and innovate. If I had time, I would spend, maybe you want to ask questions about the arguments about Sharia. Most of the arguments I get from law enforcement are, well, they're going to want a Sharia and then there's no constitution. Well, that's just not true. It's no more true than my mother's argument when John F. Kennedy, and I'm sorry, some of you probably don't remember, he was a president of the United States. But if you don't know him, you don't know that he was the first, well, he was not first, but he was a Catholic, and it was a big deal in the country that the Pope would be telling the president what to do. It was a huge, huge issue. And my mother said, "Are you kidding me? I don't pay attention to the Pope, and I'm like a loyal Catholic." So it didn't happen, and of course John F. Kennedy didn't do that. But boy, that was a perception. So canon law is to the Catholic Church as American Sharia is here. Don't get me wrong. Around the world, Sharia the merger of church and state are inordinately important for the survival of Muslims internationally. Inordinately important that they have both of those. It's the gift of God and their religion to them that provides them to survive. And I could spend time with you in interviews, both in terms of Kurdish captured or areas in Syria or Iraq. I can do it in Pakistan. I can do it all over the place. So in some places it's right, but in our rule of law it wouldn't be. And I don't know any Muslims who are trying to do that today. But if they did, I can assure you the Muslims here would quiet them down. And that isn't to say that they don't exist. Of course they do. Of course there are Muslims who want to overthrow the government. Of course there are. But you know, the last 6 guys that I've arrested were from the Sovereign Nation gangs who want to overthrow the nation, right? They got a big piece of paper and they say, you have no authority. Really, give me your license, proof of insurance. They're threatening. And when they pull a gun out, it gets pretty lively pretty fast. So let's be careful about that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is I have worked in prisons now for some time. My international work is probably most well known in prisons. I work in prisons. I go in prisons every day. I think every law enforcement officer should start their career in prisons. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're looking for. And if you go to prison, you're going to see what you don't want, right? You're going to see it. And I know that there are some here. And I am vehemently opposed to the number of people we have in prisons in the United States. It is an extraordinarily embarrassing number for a whole combination of reasons that are all wrong. One of them is, if you go through the academy, you would understand it. If I gave you a penal code, little dinky type font with all the rules, it's that thick. And then if I gave you the vehicle code, it's that thick. And if you put those two together, cops that I know who have been at it for 20 or 30 years will tell you, I can arrest anybody for anything. And yes, you can, because there's something in there. So arresting becomes a choice. And then if you put them in prison, and I know that there's some here that probably have a perspective on privatizing of prisons. I'm vehemently opposed to privatization. On the view, wow, little did I know. And the reason I don't know, obviously you have some reasons of your own, but my own reason is because I think that when you can't see it, no wonder you're looking. When I put on that badge, I had to swear, and I had to be sworn. I had to have a background investigation, looked up every damn channel that I've ever been involved with. The government, the people, in our case, said you can wear that badge. And the people take that badge away from me. I am not comfortable with non-sworn officers holding citizens and depriving of their rights, even if they should be held in jail. So I'm opposed to that and opposed to the economic structure behind it, blah, 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 but apparently, so are you. So, so I think it's wrong for our country, and it puts a lot of incentives in the wrong spot. I did not expect to end on that point. But let me just say that I genuinely thank you. You're a much smaller group than I thought we would be speaking to. Usually, I sort of say I'm the Donald Trump of prisons. I get a lot of people coming and listen. And I am not the Donald Trump of anything, by the way, but I just happen to use that because he gets such big audiences, most of them because he sells out because his seats are free. So they all take their popcorn and go, let's listen to this guy. But the reason I want to thank you is because it's hard work. And there are youngsters in this room, and there are oldsters in this room. And the interesting thing between all of you is you have no choice. You are in the same boat together. And if you can extend the same boat, the interface, the same boat mentality outside of this room, into those communities where you will be pushed up against the wall, where you will be challenged, where you will be threatened, and everything I can tell you. I don't think there's anything that's going to happen to you that hasn't happened to me. I could be wrong. But trust me when I tell you, yelled at, threatened, spit on, thrown shit at, shot at, I don't care what the it is in the sentence, all right? I've had it happen. And you just have to fall back on a statement. And I don't know if it's true in every religion. I'm not Shinto, there's a bunch that I don't know. But if you can back up and say there is a power on this earth so great that it developed the concept of love. And if that love is so great that it can overcome dislike, or at the extreme hate, if that can happen, and I tell you because you saw some of the people we not converted, but we brought over to a different side. If that visceral, killing desire, and all the things that they have done, if they can come across, that is more powerful than anything. And so you have to be that strong. If you choose to be the representative, you have to be that strong. And then you need to work with the people next to you on your right and your left, no matter what their interfaith or what their desires are, because it's one boat, and we're all in it together. Thank you so very much.